$1.8 trillion. Yeah, I just want you to let that number sit in your mind for a second. 1.8 trillion.
Yeah, it's a staggering figure.
Right. To put that into perspective, that is roughly equivalent to the entire gross domestic product of Canada.
Wow.
And it happens to be the valuation of the largest initial public offering in history, dropping this Friday, with shares priced at $135 apiece. We are talking, of course, about SpaceX.
We are.
Yeah.
But, if you're looking at this IPO thinking you're just buying a piece of a rocket company, you are mathematically wrong.
Oh, entirely wrong.
Mm.
So welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission right out of the gate is to decode what you are actually buying for that $1.8 trillion price tag.
Because the numbers buried in the prospectus, they paint a picture of a company undergoing a massive identity crisis.
Or brilliant bait and switch.
Right, exactly. When we analyze the financial insights in our primary source today, which is SpaceX IPO, beyond rockets to connectivity and AI, the whole public narrative just kind of fractures immediately.
It really does. Because the prospectus reveals this three-headed giant. You have the space division, the connectivity division, and the artificial intelligence division.
Three very distinct businesses under one roof.
Yeah. And it reminds me of going to a famous legacy burger joint, the kind of place known globally for having the absolute best burgers in town.
Right.
But then you look at the accounting ledger in the back room and you realize, wait a minute, they actually make 90% of their money quietly leasing out the commercial real estate underneath the restaurant, not selling the burgers themselves.
I love that analogy because the burgers are the branding. They get you in the door.
Exactly.
If you want to understand why this ITO matters to you, whether you're an investor debating that $135 share price or just someone trying to map out the tech shaping our future, you have to aggressively separate the PR smoke from the actual financial fire.
So let's start with that smoke, because the public perception of this company is undeniably romantic. And honestly, the prospectus doesn't even try to hide it.
No, it leans heavily into human destiny. The language in the filing is incredibly lofty for a financial document. I mean, it explicitly cites the company's mission as extending the light of consciousness to the stars.
Extending the light of consciousness
Yeah.
in an IPO perspective.
Yeah. And CEO Elon Musk actually has his pay milestones directly tied to the physical settlement of 1 million people on Mars.
Wait, 1 million people?
1 million. So it is a pitch built entirely on the emotional weight of interplanetary exploration.
But then you cross-reference that romance with the raw financial data, and you just hit a wall of hard terrestrial numbers.
I really do.
Now, I mean, we have to acknowledge the engineering miracles happening in the space division. They developed these reusable Falcon 9 boosters, and according to the source, this reusability has slashed the cost of reaching orbit by an incredible 85%.
Yeah, that 85% reduction is the linchpin of their aerospace dominance. Because, well, for decades, the paradigm of space travel was entirely disposable. It was the economic equivalent of flying a 747 from New York to London, and instead of landing it and refueling it, you just parachute out and let the airplane crash into the ocean.
Which makes every single flight astronomically expensive.
Exactly.
So by figuring out how to autonomously land a 15-story booster on a drone ship in the middle of the ocean, they essentially stopped throwing away the airplane.
Right. And by stopping the waste, they dramatically lowered the barrier to entry for getting mass into orbit.
And the launch volume totally reflects that. I mean, launch frequency has skyrocketed 6 times over since 2020.
It's massive growth.
They hit 170 orbital launches last year alone. And here's the paradox in the data that I just can't get past. Costs are down 85%, right?
Right.
Launch volume is up 600%. Yet their space revenue only grew by about 8% last year. How does that math work?
What's fascinating here is that it comes down to the fundamental mechanics of market demand and, frankly, the physical limits of the aerospace sector.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Well, 8% growth is a respectable number for a legacy industrial manufacturer.
Sure.
But it's virtually impossible to square with a company whose overall valuation has quintupled since late 2024.
Yeah, exactly.
The disconnect exists because the space market has a hard ceiling. The prospectus estimates that the total addressable market, the TAM for the entire space business, is only about $370 billion.
$370 billion sounds massive. Until you hold it up against a $1.8 trillion valuation.
Precisely. You can only launch so many weather satellites, spy satellites, and research probes before global demand is just satiated.
Right. I mean, governments only need so much hardware in orbit.
Exactly. You cannot force telecommunications companies to build multi-million-dollar payloads faster than their internal pipelines allow.
So even if the delivery truck is cheap, if nobody needs a package delivered, you aren't making money.
That's spot on. Now, to the Space Division's credit, it boasts the strongest underlying economics of their three branches right now. They are projecting a 67% gross margin for 2025.
Wait, 67%?
Yeah, so for every dollar they bring in launching those rockets, they keep 67 cents after direct costs.
That is a staggeringly efficient operation.
It is. But a $370 billion ceiling is still a ceiling. It represents the smallest total addressable market of their three business arms.
So the rockets get the magazine covers, they secure the visionary quotes about Mars, but they actually represent the smallest claim on the company's future growth.
Exactly.
Okay, so if the rocket business, the thing they are entirely famous for, is hitting a ceiling and only growing at 8%, what is actually paying the bills today?
Right. How do you justify becoming the biggest IPO in history with those numbers?
Exactly.
Well, that leads us directly to the second head of the giant. If the launch division is the visionary loss leader, the connectivity division is the silent workhorse, keeping the lights on.
We are talking about Starlink, the terrestrial satellite internet business.
The Wi-Fi.
The Wi-Fi. The source material reveals that this division supplied a shocking 61% of the company's total 2025 revenue. 61%.
Yep.
The burger joint is officially making its money on the Wi-Fi.
Aswath Damodaran, a highly regarded valuation specialist from NYU, he looked at this exact data set.
And what did he say?
His conclusion was blunt. He stated that Starlink explicitly, quote, carried the company in 2025.
Wow, carried the company.
Yeah. If you remove this connectivity revenue from the equation, the entire financial architecture of the organization basically collapses.
And unlike the space division, the growth metrics here are explosive, right? I
Yeah.
mean, in just the first quarter of this year, their subscriber base doubled year over year,
Doubled.
hitting 10.3 million active subscribers.
Yeah.
And that doubling of users drove a 32% surge in revenue.
And remember that market ceiling we discussed. For space, it was $370 billion.
Right.
For connectivity, the prospectus estimates the total addressable market at $1.6 trillion.
$1.6 trillion. That is a massive leap.
It is a profound shift in the consumer base because, the launch business relies on a handful of governments and giant corporations.
Yeah.
But connectivity targets a virtually limitless pool. Any individual, enterprise, or maritime vessel on Earth that lacks reliable broadband.
And the technology enabling that is totally different from traditional satellite internet, isn't it?
Fundamentally different. Legacy satellite internet relied on massive, school bus-sized geostationary satellites orbiting like 22,000 miles away.
Which means terrible lag.
Terrible lag. But Starlink utilizes low Earth orbit, or LEO, satellites. They're only about 300 miles up, and there are thousands of them.
Right. It's essentially a global game of optical hot potato in space.
That's a great way to put it.
They use lasers to beam data from satellite to satellite at the speed of light in a vacuum, routing around ground-based internet infrastructure entirely.
Which is why it's so incredibly disruptive. But the financial execution of that disruption is where things get complicated.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. And I have to push back a bit on the health of this division because I'm looking at these subscriber metrics.
Let's hear it.
Yes, they double their users to 10.3 million.
Mm-hmm.
But the hidden detail is that their monthly revenue per user actually fell. And not just a little bit. It dropped by a full 25%, sliding from $86 a month down to $66 a month.
It's a significant drop.
Right. So if they have a supposed $1.6 trillion total addressable market, but they have to slash their prices by a quarter just to claw their way to 10 million users, doesn't that imply the vast majority of that hypothetical market simply doesn't have the disposable income to afford the service?
It's a fair question.
Are we looking at a genuine loss leader strategy to corner the market? Or is this a foundational miscalculation of global purchasing power?
Well, what's fascinating here is that if we evaluate this through the lens of traditional retail pricing, yeah, a 25% price cut signals panic.
Right, it looks like a market rejecting your product.
Exactly. But in the economics of orbital infrastructure and digital subscriptions, the logic flips. This is a deliberate, aggressive land grab because scale dictates survival.
Okay, explain the mechanism behind that. Why does a lower price point make financial sense if the ultimate goal is profitability?
Think about the capital expenditure required to build Starlink. Launching a constellation of thousands of laser-linked satellites is an unimaginably massive, fixed upfront cost.
You're spending billions before you sign up a single customer.
Exactly. But once that mesh network is functional in low Earth orbit, the marginal cost to add subscriber number 10,000,001 is virtually zero.
Because the network is already passing over their house anyway.
Exactly. The infrastructure overhead is already spent. You basically just mail them a receiving dish.
Oh,
Therefore, the overarching financial imperative is to acquire as many users as humanly possible, as quickly as possible, to amortize that massive fixed cost over a wider base.
So the sheer volume of subscriber growth, that doubling to over 10 million users, more than compensated for the $20 drop in monthly revenue.
Yes. And the prospectus data confirms that this aggressive scaling strategy worked. Connectivity is cemented as the sturdy foundation, acting as the company's cash cow.
Okay, so let's recap where we are.
Er,
We have the romantic space business that captures the imagination but grows slowly.
right?
And we have the connectivity business acting as a terrestrial piggy bank, generating 61% of the revenue. But that raises an even bigger question.
Where is the money going?
Exactly. Starlink is printing cash.
Yeah.
So where is all that money going? Because the company doesn't go public at $1.8 trillion just to let satellite subscription fees sit idle in a checking account?
No, they don't. The money is being systematically siphoned out of the connectivity division and fed directly into an unimaginably cash-hungry machine.
And that machine is artificial intelligence. Specifically, their AI arm, known as XAI.
The third head of the giant.
Yeah, this is the newest branch of the corporate tree, and the financial reality of it is staggering. Last year, XAI absorbed $12.7 billion of the company's total capital expenditures.
It's just a colossal figure.
Let me repeat that for the listener. $12.7 billion. That means they spent more money building out artificial intelligence infrastructure than they spent on the space and connectivity segments combined.
It is the absolute definition of a foundational pivot. The cash cow is being aggressively milked to bankroll a multi-trillion-dollar AI gamble.
Wow.
And to understand why that $12.7 billion figure is so high, we really have to look at the physical reality of modern AI.
Right, because it's not just a software program sitting on a laptop somewhere.
Far from it. Training large language models requires compute clusters of a scale we have rarely seen in human history. We are talking about tens of thousands of specialized H100 GPUs wired together.
And those chips run incredibly hot, don't they?
Oh, they do. They require specialized liquid cooling systems, entire localized power grids to supply the gigawatts of electricity needed.
Gigawatts.
Yes, and massive data centers just to house them all. It is a relentless, brutal burn rate. And as a result, the prospectus outlines that XAI currently possesses the lowest margins of all three businesses.
Which makes sense given the overhead.
Exactly. And due to fierce competition from other tech giants, those already thin margins are actively falling.
But the prospectus doesn't just present the doom and gloom of those expenses, does it? I mean, it highlights a massive revenue stream to try and calm the nerves of potential investors.
It does. They point to XAI's flagship computing center, known as Colossus.
Colossus. Fitting name.
It's a monolithic data center. And XAI has successfully leased the computing power of Colossus to a rival AI lab, Anthropic.
Right, and they leased it for an eye-watering $1.25 billion per month. $1.25 billion a month. Now, on the surface, that sounds like ultimate validation. But if I am listening to this right now and I hold shares in any legacy tech company, I am screaming at my dashboard.
Because of the exit clause?
Yes. When you read the fine print in the source text, it reveals that either company can exit that lease with just 90 days' notice.
The 3-month escape hatch.
How is that not terrifying? You just said they burned nearly $13 billion building this infrastructure.
Right.
If Anthropic finds a cheaper compute cluster and triggers that 90-day clause, you are suddenly left holding an empty, multi-billion-dollar warehouse of rapidly depreciating silicon.
It's true.
I mean, is it relying on a short-term lease to justify a massive capital burn? Incredibly precarious.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is deeply precarious, and it highlights the extreme volatility of the AI infrastructure market right now.
Because the tech changes so fast.
Exactly. The hardware evolves so rapidly that nobody wants to be locked into a multi-year contract for chips that might be obsolete in 2 business quarters.
That makes sense for Anthropic, but rough for XAI.
Very rough. But the prospectus attempts to justify taking on this immense risk and stomaching the low margins with one monumental overarching projection.
Oh boy. It has to be another total addressable market figure.
It is. The prospectus claims that the total addressable market for XAI is $26 trillion.
Trillion. With a T, 26 trillion.
To frame that against the valuation, they are telling investors that this AI division, the one with the falling margins and the 90-day lease, represents 93% of the company's total projected future value.
93%.
93%.
Wait, hold on. If 93% of the value is tied up in XAI, then if I buy a share for $135 this Friday, I'm not really buying rockets.
No,
I'm barely even buying a global satellite internet provider.
barely.
I am overwhelmingly buying a $26 trillion promise about the future of artificial intelligence.
That is the inescapable mathematical reality presented to you in this IPO. But we have to bring Aswath Damodaran, the NYU valuation expert, back into the conversation here to deliver the grounding blow.
What did he have to say about the 26 trillion?
He looked at that TAM figure, a market size that, again, is larger than the entire GDP of the United States, and he stated flatly that it, quote, borders on fantasy.
Borders on fantasy.
Yeah.
That is a devastating critique from a highly respected financial mind, dropping right before the biggest IPO in history.
It really exposes the extreme tension holding this $1.8 trillion valuation together.
Absolutely.
You have tangible, physical, highly successful businesses in space launch and global connectivity, but their revenues are being aggressively diverted to bankroll a highly speculative software venture whose projected value is so massive it actively defies conventional economic modeling.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, as you watch the market open this Friday? Let's distill this $1.8 trillion behemoth down to its true components based on the hard data we've unpacked.
Sounds good.
First, you have the space dream. The rockets and the Mars colonies. It has achieved undeniable engineering miracles and permanently altered the physics of launch costs.
But it suffers from a restrictive market ceiling and slow 8% revenue growth.
Right. Second, you have the connectivity engine, Starlink. It utilizes a revolutionary low Earth orbit mesh network to capture a massive user base.
And it absorbed a strategic drop in revenue per user to aggressively capture market share. Now it acts as the vital financial foundation, generating 61% of the company's cash.
And finally, you have the wild card, the speculative AI gamble, XAI. It is burning more capital than the rest of the company combined, operating on shrinking margins and relying on a fragile 90-day lease.
All to validate a $26 trillion market projection that leading financial minds are calling a fantasy.
It's wild. The ultimate takeaway here, I think, is really about the nature of modern technology titans. When you look at a massive market-defining company today, the consumer branding rarely matches the actual financial engine.
That's entirely true. The branding is rockets, astronauts, and Mars exploration. But the reality is optical satellite networks, massive liquid-cooled data centers, and a high-stakes multi-billion-dollar bet on artificial intelligence.
It brings us right back to our burger joint. The neon sign outside flashes burgers. The television commercials show burgers, but the accountant in the back room is entirely focused on commercial real estate prices.
Exactly. You always have to look at what is actually paying the bills and perhaps more importantly, where those bills are being spent.
Right.
Which leaves us with one final lingering thought to consider as the opening bell rings on Friday.
Let's hear it.
If 93% of this company's projected future market is entirely dependent on AI, a sector where their margins are already actively falling, their data center costs are astronomical, and their primary revenue stream hinges on a precarious 90-day exit clause, at what point does this stop being a space exploration company that happens to dabble in AI and start being an AI infrastructure company that just uses rockets as a really expensive marketing gimmick?
That is a question worth $1.8 trillion. Thank you for joining us as we bypass the headlines and unpack the real mechanisms hidden in the numbers today. Keep questioning the narrative, and we'll be back next time to decode another complex world for you.